So last week we talked about constraints, Brandon did. So this week we're going to talk about direct connections and set-driven keys, other ways to connect stuff. My name is Dara, and let's get started. So you can go ahead to the next slide. So direct connections. Essentially, you are directly connecting attributes to other attributes between nodes. So you're making direct connections. You can make direct connections with common transformations like translate, rotate, scale, for example, like connecting translate to rotate, rotate to scale, etc., etc. But you can also directly connect attributes with custom attributes. And another thing to note about direct connections is that in the channel box, a direct connection will be notated as this light yellow. So that's good to know for any sort of troubleshooting because this is so you know how your attributes are connected to something. So that being said, with this, you can't change the value directly in the channel box when it has this light yellow highlight next to it. You can go on ahead, Brandon. So how to set up direct connections? There are two ways. The first way is through the node editor. In the video, I'm kind of showing how to do how to set up direct connections, and I pull up the node editor, kind of open up, expand the attributes, and then in this example, I have like the sphere, the cube, and I'm connecting the translate directly to another translate attribute of the cube. So you can see that once I directly connect those two things together, they're directly affecting one another. So through the node editor, it's kind of like directly drawing a line from one to the other. And then you can also connect multiple attributes. So while moving the translate x of the sphere, that directly affects the multiple attributes of the cube that I connected to that attribute. And then another way to set up direct connections is through the connection editor. So you can access that through Windows, General Editors, Connection Editor. With the connection editor, there's a left side and a right side. By default, it'll be left side being the driver and the right side being the driven. So it goes, it's specified by the from to option. So the left side, from the left side, it'll go into the right side. So when you're making a direct connection, you just go and select the attributes you would like to connect from both sides. It's just selecting them, and there you have it, a direct connection. So I'm just imitating the same example that I did through the node editor, but with the connection editor. How like the translate x of the sphere is directly affecting the attributes of the cube. And direct connections can be done via the node editor or the connection editor. It's really just a matter of preference. I like the node editor because I work in a node editor a lot and I like drawing lines between things, but a lot of people like the connection editor too. So another example of using direct connections outside of connecting primitives to each other, one example is connecting custom attributes to a blend shape. So in this example, I have kind of like these custom attributes that I made for like a smile, a puffy cheek, a puffy chin, and I directly connected those custom attributes to a blend shape and their value. So when you manipulate the value on the custom attribute, that will directly affect the blend shape and give you the values that you want. So that's one way to use direct connections. Go on ahead to the next slide. Yep. Next, we'll be talking about set-driven keys and kind of the basics, the rundown of it. It's a technique for driving the animation of one object or attribute using another attribute. So it creates a relationship between pairs of attributes where one attribute value will drive the value of another one. So yeah. With that, you must establish a driver, kind of like a parent, and that'll control the driven, kind of like a child. So think of it, driver controlling the driven, a parent controlling a child. So A change in the driver attribute will definitely alter the value of a driven attribute. So if you change the driver, it'll change the driven. And another thing to note about set-driven keys is that it's not procedural. It won't automatically animate the driven object. So the animator must key the attributes themselves. Just think of set-driven keys as another efficient way to set up movement for the animator to control. And set-driven keys are commonly used for example, finger setups, mechanical rigs, connecting blend chips to facial controllers, etc. It's a really useful application. So how to set up set-driven keys? So under the key menu, there's set-driven keys and then set. You want to click on the option box next to set. You can also find this menu under the animation menu set. So with that, you pull up the set-driven key window and you have the driver on the top and the driven on the bottom. You want to load the driver object on the top and the driven object in the bottom. So in this example, I have the cube and the sphere again. So I'm going to make the sphere kind of like the parent, the driver object. So I have this controlling the cube in this example. So I select those objects and kind of load it in their respective driver-driven roles. And then you want to hit key to create you want to select the attributes that you would like to connect together, and then you hit key to create a relationship between these two attributes. Then you want to change the driver object attribute values, and then the driven. Key note is to change the driver face before the driven, because the driver directly affects the driven. So you want to change the position of both of those objects, driver face, then driven, and then key those positions. So set-driven keys basically allow manipulation of the key positions, the animation. So in this example, I'm kind of setting up kind of like previous examples where I have the sphere moving in the x-axis and the cube moving in the y-axis. And key thing to note is that it kind of hits a wall. Like you can only go to a certain point, and that certain point is the position that you key. So compared to like a direct connection, it has its limits, and the limit would be what you key into the set-driven keys. But you can basically key as many times as you like, creating as many different associations as you need between the pair of attributes. Right now I'm showing how you can manipulate multiple attributes. So I'm having the translate X of the sphere affect the translate Y of the cube and the scale Z of the cube. So now whenever I move it positively or negatively, it affects how the cube is transformed. So other things to know about set-driven keys. It is by default ease in, ease out, thus you may want to change the animation in the graph editor, so the video kind of shows that. Changing the animation will affect the movement of the set-driven keys. Thank you. So you can see I selected the cube that's the driven object. It has animation on it. So it has like ease in, ease out. Whenever it moves to position, it'll ease into it and ease out of it. And maybe I don't want that. So I could change it to linear so that it could go straight to that position and straight out of it. The graph editor is also useful for like changing the positions and changing how you want the animation to be. So let's say I would rather have the cube scale be evenly distributed throughout this movement. That's how I would kind of change it in the graph editor, for example. So now whenever I move the translate X of the sphere, that's how I could evenly distribute the scale. kind of waiting for the screen to load up. Yeah. Maybe that's... I can see like part of it for some reason. Yeah. Thank you, Brandon. I can.
Yeah, you're all good. And I'm here finally.
Hi, Roman. Wait, before you change, I still have one more thing to add. So, in the channel box with set-driven keys, it's highlighted as like a medium blue. Geez, is that feedback coming from me? I apologize.
Brandon, just mute your mic so there's no feedback.
Okay, there we go. Sweet. Sorry about that. So in the channel box, set-driven keys is highlighted as a medium blue next to its values. That's just important to know in case you need to know how your attributes are connected. And of course, you can change this value despite it being connected through set-driven keys. So you can like change the value in the channel box, even though it's connected. And of course, set-driven keys can be connected to custom attributes. All right, go ahead, Brandon.
It's lagging a little bit.
Yep. I would go ahead and pause that video and then kind of start it from the beginning. It's kind of just lagging a little bit.
It's not lagging a little bit, it's lagging a lot of bit.
Okay, yes, I take that back. And it's gone.
I think he's just trying to restart it.
Yep.
There we go.
All right. So example of set-driven keys being used. On the left side, I have set-driven keys kind of set up to where the controllers are driving facial blend shapes. So I key the position of the controllers and the blend shape, and that's how I create the connection between the two of them so that the animator can use the controllers to control the facial blend shapes. And then in the right example, I have kind of like an example of set-driven keys for fingers, attributes driving the finger poses. So it's like using custom attributes to drive finger poses. So like finger curling, cupping hands, gripping a fist, etc. This is kind of like a way set-driven keys are used, and that whole like finger posing, finger setup is used so that it makes it easier on the animator to kind of do quick poses with the hands. I am done with this slide. Good old technical difficulties. Thank you for bearing with us, everyone. All right, so to basically sum up what I've talked about, just comparing direct connections to set-driven keys. Direct connections are basically the manipulation of attribute values, like the direct connections of it. You're directly connecting these two things. And it commonly uses node editor, connection editor for setup. And in a way, it can be limitless depending on the attributes that you input. So if you input a transform attribute into another, it can be pretty limitless, quote unquote. For set-driven keys, it's more so the manipulation of animation and key positions. It uses the set-driven key window found under the key menu to set it up, and it works within the limit of the positions or animation you input, which is not necessarily a bad thing because this could allow for very specific control. And then next slide, please. Oh no.
He's just
Yeah.
every slide because it doesn't really work when transitioning.
Yeah. It sucks that it has to be like this, but no matter. And then as for similarities, both are viable ways to create relationships between attributes, both are possible solutions to specific problems. They can be used with custom attributes, and they both establish kind of like a driver and a driven. So it's not exactly a mutual relationship where really only the driver affects the driven, not vice versa. So that's it for my lecture on direct connections and set-driven keys. I can't really show demos on my laptop because my laptop doesn't have Maya nor can run it. So I did the best that I could with this presentation. Are there any questions or comments?
Quick version of what Dara did. You can also find the set-driven key by going to the rigging tab right here on your menu and click on this one. It's a set-driven key menu set. It's basically a chain with little crosshairs. So you'll open up this. I'll just gonna quickly do a set-driven key. Cube 1.
And so right now, what he's doing is kind of
Okay.
He's basically just connecting these attributes.
All right, so graph editor. So we have the curve. In order to prepare it for being able to have an infinite value set to it, I'm going to go to View and then click on the infinity checkbox so I can see what its infinite value is like. And it's basically it's a straight line from there on because we've only defined an endpoint and a start point. So if I wanted to make this kind of an infinite value, I can set this curve tangent to spline. It's right next to the auto tangent. So it's because there's only 2 points, it's going to go in a straight line like this. And then I can go to curves pre-infinity and set it to linear. And the infinity will follow the current curve. Go to curve again, post-infinity, linear, and now we've essentially created an infinite. We've created basically an infinite set-driven key in a way. The only time you'd really want to use this is if you want to extend your blend shape, but that can be very awkward to handle because sometimes you just will have a point where your smile should not go as far as it goes.